Hey, what is going on, everybody? It is Gabe,
It's Caleb.
and today you are tuning into another episode of the Positive Outlook Podcast. Caleb, what does every great podcast start with?
Starts with an icebreaker.
All right, so I've got the icebreaker. Oh man, that was that botched that one. I've got the icebreaker this week. So, what is one piece of advice that somebody gave you that you totally disregarded that ended up biting you in the butt?
Hmm. Ended up biting me in the butt.
Yeah, biting you in the butt. In better terms, just somebody gave you a piece of advice and you had a little bit of smugness or arrogance to you, and you're like, I know what I'm doing, and you didn't listen to it, and it ended up burning you.
Okay. I guess I'll give. I said this quote pretty recently. I think a couple episodes ago. And it's a super simple one, and this is probably the best I could apply right off the top of my head. But it's the quote: "If nothing changes, nothing changes."
Mm-hmm.
So let me give a little context. So I was at the college in Traverse City, and it was one of my roommates in the dorms. He had that quote written on the whiteboard, and I remember him saying it one time. And in my head, I'm like, that is the dumbest quote ever. But like, if it helps you get by, that's fantastic, right?
Right.
And next thing I know, I find myself in a rut and continuing these patterns that keep me in this rut. And I all just popped into my head. If nothing changes, nothing changes. And so I ended up actually using that quote, the one that I scoffed at,
Yeah.
to help get me out of this circular pattern that I was stuck in. And it's not always going to hit. Quotes don't always hit the same every time you hear them or on specific days. But let me tell you, it definitely helped me get out of that rut. And I was a little more, I guess you could say, humble after using that quote to
Yeah.
help change my
Okay.
patterns.
Yeah.
What
So,
about you?
stop it, dude. Anyway, so no, I'm just kidding. I always do that with the icebreaker. When you throw it back to me, I'm always like, no, let's move on. But no, so it was actually it was a humiliating experience the first time that, well, not the first time, but this experience in general. And so I was starting in real estate, and you go through a whole training program. You do like a month of training, and they tell you before you submit any offers for your clients or do anything like that right off the bat, make sure you sit down with another agent or a manager, someone with experience, and have them go through the offer with you to make sure everything looks good. And I was like,
Okay.
psh, I know what I'm doing, right? I don't need somebody else to come in, sit down with me and figure this out. So, my buyers wanted a house. I submit an offer and I wait. The listing agent, who's on the side of the seller, ends up giving me a call back, and they were just like, "What the hell is this offer? Like, that you missed all of this. This isn't right. What is going on here?" And she was basically like coming at me, and I was like, "Listen, I'm really sorry. This is my first ever contract I've ever written, and it I guess I just don't know what I'm doing. I just kind of like folded there and admitted it. I was like, I don't know. And then she really reeled back and she was like, "Oh, okay. Why didn't you say that earlier? Let's sit down and go through this and see, like, kind of coach you through it, kind of thing, right?" So we talked over the phone. We went over the whole offer. She walked me through everything, and I was like, "Wow, that was." After we hang up the phone, I was like out of energy. I'm like, "Oh my goodness, that was so embarrassing." But if I would have just taken the advice and not been on my high horse when I first started in real estate, then that wouldn't have happened. It would have been much smoother. However, I do want to flip it a little bit. I learned a
Hmm.
lot from that. I learned a lot from that mistake, and I think there's a bit of gold in that as well. You know, I don't know.
100%. The best way to learn sometimes, unfortunately, is burning yourself.
Yeah.
Even if it takes multiple times of touching the hot pan, eventually you learn not to touch the hot pan, even if it's the hard way,
Yep.
which I think kind of segues into our episode today pretty well.
Yeah. Yeah. So what are we talking about?
Today we're talking about handling criticism and giving criticism. And when we talk about handling criticism, it means all forms of criticism, constructive criticism, along with the more derogatory criticism
Mm-hmm.
that may not be delivered in the softest way possible, or sometimes it might not even be delivered in the correct way at all.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Excuse me. Sorry. So, all right. Yeah, man, criticism is a tough one, isn't it? We live
Yeah.
in man, I remember growing up, I didn't want to listen to anybody. Someone tells me how to do
Hmm.
something and I was like, no, like that's actually a good idea, but I'm not going to tell you that. You know what I mean? And I feel like it's so common to see that anymore.
Well, the first reaction for so many people, including myself, often, very often with criticism, is deflecting, because I don't need anyone to tell me what I'm doing wrong, or I don't think I messed up in this aspect, or
Mhm.
just it's this like emotional reaction to someone picking apart whatever it is you're doing, and you really want to defend it, but you have to stop yourself from defending it, because you're never going to be able to open your mind and your ears to what they have to say if your first reaction is always either, no, no, I'm correct, or I'm right, or no, you don't know what you're talking about.
Right. Yeah, it's kind of undermining or uh I guess yeah, being condescending or undermining the individual who is giving you criticism. And
Hmm.
I think something that's really important to take into consideration when it comes to advice, I'm sure you've heard this before, is if you wouldn't take advice from that person, don't take criticism from that person. And so I think a really important first step when it comes to being given criticism is avoid immediately reacting. Because
Yes. And
yeah, so
go ahead.
thank you. So because it is important to hear the words and understand them and understand that there's more factors in it than this person is disappointed in me, right? That's not
Hmm.
it's not always A to B. There could be a lot more involved.
Well, and one thing I'd like to talk about is where you just said if you wouldn't take advice, don't take criticism. And I actually kind of disagree with that, because I think if anyone's criticizing you, there is always at least a sliver of truth in what they're saying. And one plentiful example you see working in a fast food restaurant are the Karens, right? Because Karens are always on everything. Every little
Mm-hmm.
thing needs to be perfect or it ruins their whole day.
Right.
And they come in and they just want to take it all out on the low paid, or like, I mean, I work at Dunkin', so it's okay. I'm
Yeah.
not dissing on anyone that works there. But um, the point is, they just want to take all their stress and all their anger out on you. And so you have to be able to not react to it, and you also, if you want to benefit from it as best as you possibly can, try and pull any bit of truth you can from that conversation. And it takes a lot of humility to do this. It takes a lot of patience to do this. But if you can, you become a better person with every Karen that walks through that door. And that's not always Karen's intention, right? Sometimes her intention is just to bring you down.
Yeah.
But the point is, if you can focus on the objective truth in what she's saying, right? Like, oh, I
Yeah.
waited this long for my food. Okay, now I know to speed up next time, or whatever it is. And in any aspect of your life, someone can totally derail all of your achievements in life, all of your accomplishments, but there's always some bit of truth in what these people have to say.
Yeah, that's actually it's really important. If need be, just remind yourself that constructive criticism can help you improve. And
And it may not always be delivered to you in the most constructive way, but you also have to
most of the
remember
time
it
it
can
won't
be
be.
right,
Yeah.
because it gets all emotional, and once it's emotional, good luck, because it can be really difficult from there. So what I would give some advice on there is just try to leave your emotions to the side.
Yeah.
Try to just listen as if they're talking to someone else if you have to, but try to remove that defensiveness and that, because they're probably wrong for the most part. But as I was saying, there's always some bit of truth in there. And again, if you can learn from those kind of interactions, then next time you get actual constructive criticism, it's going to be way easier to actually handle that criticism and use that criticism as a tool to improve yourself.
Right. And in those situations, it's really important to listen to respond, not to defend, right? So it's really just a matter of hearing the words, seeing any truth that's in it, not immediately like Caleb said trying to deflect or find a way to react to it. Listen, see if there's value in it, it's totally up to you, right? Every situation is different. There's always variety when it comes to it. But if you feel like there's something to be learned in it, it's important to listen. And I think that's really a key step at what we're getting here.
Exactly. Be quick to hear, slow to speak, and slow to anger. And if you
Yeah.
can factor in all three of those things when you're getting the not so good criticism, then you're going to pull something away from it. You're going to be a better person for it. And sometimes when you're actually slow to anger in those scenarios, the person who's blowing up on you actually realizes what they're doing because you stay emotionally just stable and they're over here going off. And when they see that you're actually listening to what they have to say, sometimes that throws them right through a loop and they're
Yeah.
like,
And
wow,
then they're like, I'm
I
sorry.
because they're just expecting to make you mad because sometimes that's exactly what they want.
Yeah.
And so this is giving them the exact opposite, and it can honestly benefit both parties.
Yeah. And in this scenario that Caleb is explaining here, like whether it's fast food or coffee shop, whatever it is, there is when the customer comes in, there's a role that they expect to be fulfilled, and then there's a person. They don't see the person, they see the role when it comes to this.
Hmm.
So they say, "Hey, you're X. Why are you not doing this as quickly as I want you to? Why is this not up to standard? Why is this not the quality?" They're not talking to the person, they're talking to the role. So if you can separate those two and connect the criticism to the role instead of yourself, it'll really help you separate the emotion from it.
Yes. And so today we're talking about handling criticism. And so I figured it would be easier to start with the stuff that nobody and most of us, I mean, most of the time, I'll admit I don't respond this way. I've been working on it very heavily because it's how you should respond. And it's gotten a lot easier the more that I've done it. But it applies to literally everything. And once you can handle those types of criticisms, getting the hard stuff that's not delivered in these ways becomes a lot easier to pull all of the lessons you can because this applies to everything, right? We brought up fast food, but I fly planes. I'm in flight training right now, and I've had some instructors that do they give it to you as cut and dry as they possibly can. They give it direct, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm a perfectionist. So when I'm up there flying, I want everything to be perfect. I don't want to hear anything that I did wrong because I want it to be that level of perfection, which is absurd, but it's how I view it because I want to be the best I can be.
Yeah.
And so whenever I take criticism, sometimes it does suck because I'm sitting here and in my head I'm like, man, I just flew the best possible approach I possibly could have, and here he is picking away every little piece of it. But when you can step back and you can understand why, especially in a growth environment like that,
Mm-hmm.
that's the main difference in these scenarios. He's actually telling me why or how to be better because he wants me to be the best I can be. And that goes back way back to what you said earlier in this episode about the fact that if you can understand that in those scenarios, really they just want the best for you.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not always going to deliver that perfectly either, right? They might say things that hurt your feelings, but you have to learn to get over that. You have to callous yourself, you have to callous your mind to where you can actually accept that and move on because we're not all perfect. There's going
Right.
to be something wrong. And that's why, again, I also say there's a little bit of humility in there because if you think that you're just the best, there is no better than you, then when someone tries to criticize you, you're going to do nothing but get angry.
Yep. Yeah. And I know I can admit I've been pretty stubborn my whole life. And
Yep.
one thing that really helps me is asking questions opposed to challenging the feedback, right? So stopping and saying, "Okay," and sometimes that's also a part of reacting immediately, where you ask the defensive questions, and if it turns into a constructive conversation, that's the goal. That's what you want to happen. So if you're stubborn and you can't just keep your mouth shut, sometimes just ask, and eventually you guys will come to a mutual ground and it'll feel more okay with admitting defeat, right? We're just saying, okay, you know what? What you're saying has value and I will apply it moving forward, right?
Right. And for the instances where there's absolutely, in my opinion, this is a very rare occurrence, but where there's absolutely nothing you can pull from the criticism. It's someone just bashing you just to bash you. There is still always something you can learn because you can never control how the criticism is delivered to you. That is not in your control. But you can always control how you react and how you respond and how you're going to move forward from the incident of the criticism.
Right. Now, how do you deal with giving criticism to others?
What do you mean? Like how do I
Yeah.
deliver it?
I mean, say we're working together, right? And
Mhm.
there's a customer that walks up to me and they're kind of rude, right? So I'm rude back and I walk back to you and I'm like, get a load of that guy. But the customer wasn't really doing anything wrong and I'm just being kind of smug and arrogant. What would you say to me?
Well, usually, sorry, I apparently have a frog in my throat or something.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It depends on a lot of things. I try to be as polite and as direct as I can be,
Mm-hmm.
and I try to balance the two. I probably care a little too much about my delivery sounding polite, but
Yeah.
usually I will always call them out. So, for example, I'd be like, Gabe, it sounded like that got kind of out of hand. And then I'd let them explain the situation. So you tell me exactly what happened
Right.
in your perspective. And then once hearing this perspective, I'd say, okay, that's a fair point. And if it's not a fair point, I might still say it's a fair point because usually it's not going to help with the actual criticism of what happened to just go after every piece of it.
Right.
So I'll go to the root of the problem and be like, okay, so it seems like they exploded on you. They were having a terrible day. It's honestly just not a really great way to respond to somebody to get angry back at them. And
Mm-hmm.
also, if it's violating a work policy, I'll bring that up. I'll give it to them with the facts, but I'll try to be as polite and understanding as I can be, especially depending on the environment. Sometimes I'm a little too direct, and sometimes I'm not direct enough. It's
Yeah.
kind of something I'm always working on. Because giving criticism can be difficult,
Mm-hmm.
especially depending on your relationship with the person you're giving criticism to.
Yeah.
Um, if it's my little brother, it's as direct as it possibly can be, with as
Yeah.
few words said as possible, because it's so direct.
Yeah. So that was gonna be my next question. Do you find it easier to give criticism to those you love or to those that you have no relationship with?
100% to those that I love, because at the end of the day, if it comes out wrong and I mess up or I'm too aggravated to give the criticism I was trying to give, I know that at the end of the day, we're still family or we're still good friends and we're going to be able to discuss later. Whereas at work, let's say I give the direct, just not very kind approach.
Mm-hmm.
They might go around and tell everybody else at work that I'm just some a hole. And then it could just start all this drama and all
Yeah.
these things. So I don't know. And it's different for everybody. But when I give criticism, I always just try to go after the problem and not the person,
Mm-hmm.
unless the person gets in the way of the problem,
Yeah. I
which
think
goes back to us talking about handling criticism, where you have to try and remove that emotional
right.
aspect of it.
Yeah, even while giving, you have to.
Hmm.
But I think there's a lot of value in individuals who like to see other people succeed and who want them to grow. So it's really important. Like criticism, you're not growing without it. You are not becoming
Hmm.
a better person if a third party spectator isn't telling you where your shortcomings are obvious to them. Especially like Caleb said, in a growth environment, right? Like when you're flying, it's so important for someone to be there and just tally and nick at every single one of your flaws. Because if you didn't have that, how would you get better, right? And when it comes to an individual, if they have the ability to talk to their loved ones and say, "Hey, what have you been up to lately? Are you eating well?" Like, yeah, that's the third time you've gotten fast food since Monday. Like, what's going on there? And more so bringing it up in a manner of like, "Hey, there's always that underlying, but hey, I care about you. I want to make sure that you're making the right decisions. I don't want to see you go down this negative path." And it could be as small as you're sleeping in too late every day, or as big as I don't like the people that you're hanging out with, right?
Hmm.
And I think in those situations, it's really easy for the receiver to act emotionally, because I don't know. Sometimes when you're doing the wrong thing and you know it, it sucks when somebody brings it up because you're like, I know, like I know I shouldn't be doing this, but like I don't know what else to do, right? And that's a really hard position, and that's where you, as a friend, after giving the criticism, say, hey, listen, man, I'm happy to like let's try something out together. Let's see what we can do to make you stronger. Let's see what we can do to make you a winner.
And one thing that I would say when giving criticism is super important, especially when it's someone closer to you, where it's more prevalent whether they're actually taking any of your criticism, is exercising a lot of patience. Because as someone who's stubborn, and this is going to sound terrible, but for the most part, it is true. When I'm in this scenario where I'm getting criticism of an issue I'm unaware of in my life, my first instinct is to defend myself.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that interaction, I'll start reflecting and thinking of every bit of that conversation. And then I'll start applying it to my situation. And I have so many like light bulb moments where I'm like, wow, they are absolutely correct about this. And I had no idea.
Yep.
And so then I get the humble aspect of me where it's like, hey, just so you know, you were right, and then I made this change, and I'll inform them that their criticism actually helped me a lot because so often we get criticism and then we never actually get to thank people for that
Right.
criticism because that's pretty difficult to do sometimes.
Yeah. Absolutely. So yeah, I think that's a really important piece as well, and that kind of calls back to like questioning it in the moment. Like if you
Hmm.
are one of those people who get defensive, take practice having a conversation about the criticism while it's happening. Say, well, I was gonna say, well, you show me how to do it, but people get really, well, you do it then. You know what I mean? And they throw their stuff and walk away. If you're so good at it, you do it. But
Yeah.
yeah, Riley and I experienced a lot of that when we were flipping the rental. Um,
Hmm.
man, oh man, we had a lot of fun with that. But I would be out there like I remember one time I was replacing the flooring on the second story, and so I tore up all the carpet. We didn't want the carpet anymore. We were gonna put hardwood down, and we tear up all the carpet. And you see why they did carpet because where the plywood is coming on the subflooring, there was like a half-inch gap down below.
Oh,
And so if we were to do any like laminate or hardwood, you would bow it every time you step on it. So I had to get like liquid concrete, pour it all in there,
yeah.
and but before I did that, there were gaps everywhere, so I had to fill in all the gaps. And I'm figuring this out as I'm working on it. Well, I'm out there for like probably 6 hours one morning. Riley comes out and she's like, "What have you been up to? Like, what have you been doing?" And I just look at her and I'm like, "Listen, like, come on." And so I think in that example, it's really important to understand that you, whoever's giving, whoever's receiving, whoever's receiving, whoever's giving, you guys are two completely different people seeing two different worlds. And it's really important to understand where they're coming from, but also understand that you know your own role, right?
Yep. And I'd say it's equally as important to understand the timing of when to inform this person of your circumstances because
Absolutely.
if they come in questioning what have you been doing and you go to inform them quickly and abrasively and in that moment,
Yeah.
it can easily escalate because obviously and this is important too because sometimes when you receive criticism you're not always doing everything wrong. It's always there's little nitpicky things where
Yeah.
it's like you could improve on this or it's simply the other person not necessarily understanding exactly where you're at. Maybe
Right.
you've already made the improvements that they're questioning, but when you react like quickly and abrasively, then it's just going to escalate the situation. So if you can, come in with the more understanding viewpoint. And again, this is the ultimate way to accept criticism. It's not going to happen every single time. It might not even happen most times, but it's something that when you work at over time,
Mm-hmm.
it becomes more and more a habit, just a way of life
Yeah.
where you can now accept criticism through thick and through thin, no matter where you're at.
Yeah. Absolutely. If you could turn it into like a humor, or like, something like that. That's a great method as well. I don't know, if you can get both parties laughing when they're going at each other's throat, that's a great skill to have as well. So man, there's so many different ways to tackle criticism, but I think the most important point here is understand that there can always be value, and don't immediately react. And
Hmm.
question if you need to immediately react. If you have a tough time with emotional IQ, then ask questions.
And yeah, just try to stay as collected as you possibly can. And that might be asking a lot from you, depending on what you're going through specifically, or where you're at specifically, or because we all have touchy subjects in our own lives where we can take criticism in this area really well because we're not all defensive, we're not maybe as fully invested or whatever reason. We can take these criticisms really well, but as soon as you start touching on this, that, and the other thing, then it becomes all defensive and don't talk to me like that, or you don't know what you're talking about, or
Yeah.
whatever it is. And so yeah, I would say the biggest takeaway is 100% just try to take away whatever lesson you can, even if it's given in a completely incorrect way.
Yeah.
Completely incorrect. And then advice on giving criticism in order to avoid coming in and being a Karen, or coming in and accidentally escalating a situation. Try to be patient, try to be calm, try to be direct about the problem. And sometimes they say like the compliment sandwich, where they do a compliment, criticism, compliment. I'm not a huge fan of an exact layout on how to give criticism personally,
Yeah.
but if you can filter in and let them know what they're doing well, that helps a lot. When you can recognize and acknowledge, hey, I've noticed you're doing a lot better here, but I still see you need improvements there.
Mhm.
If you can give criticism like that, you're going to help avoid that absolute need or the absolute feeling of need to defend yourself.
Absolutely. Great. Great, great, great. Well, what do you think? Do you have anything else you want to add to today's episode?
Guys, we're just here to criticize all of you right here, right now. Stop what you're doing, do better.
Yeah.
But on a real note, we're all trying. We really are. And if you're trying, then that is a huge step in the right direction. It takes a lot of practice. I'm still working on this heavily because
Mhm.
I have a lot of areas of my life where I have a hard time with criticism.
Amen.
But it's a journey. It's a process. And just remember, again, just be quick to hear, slow to speak, and slow to anger.
Amen.
That's my biggest advice when it comes to taking criticism.
All right, man. Well, I appreciate you guys tuning in so much. I hope you guys have a great rest of your week. If you guys enjoy our content, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment. And happy Monday.
And if you made it this far, comment down below a fun or funny or terrible criticism moment if you have one, because
Yes.
these can create some pretty great stories sometimes.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you guys for tuning in. We love you guys. And if you made it this far, you're a real one. You are not a square. If you a little callback to an old TikTok of
Old
ours.
TikTok. Yeah. Holy cow. All right. And you guys enjoy your 4th of July. Stay safe. Have fun. Tell the family I said hi.
Happy 4th and happy Monday.
Peace.